Weidenholzer. I want to welcome you to this afternoon's discussion on the situation of Yazidi women in Iraq and the overall picture. I'm very pleased that we have two distinguished guests from Iraq. Mrs. Ala Talabani. She is member of the Iraqi Council of Representatives and member of the Patriotic Union of Kurdistan. She also co-founded the Women for a Free Iraq, and she's also very active in the work of reconciliation. And we will hear this afternoon what this could be under Iraqi conditions, how difficult this endeavor is. And I'm also very delighted that Mr. Hisham Al-Hashimi is present. He is a researcher and he is specialized on extremist movements such as Al-Qaeda and Daesh, ISIS. He's author of the book The World of Daesh, and he is a member of the scientific committee of the Baghdad Conference Combating Terrorism, and also consultant for the Alliance in the region. So these are two distinguished contributors this afternoon. We agreed that we will have two inputs which will be rather short, and then we come into a discussion. And I think everything is actually possible to discuss because it is a complicated situation, and there's only one thing we know definitely, that we have to find an answer and we have to stop it, but no one has the recipe how to stop it. So the meeting is also web streamed. Just to let you know that there will be probably other people also following you if you take the floor. Okay? So, Ala, I want to ask you to start. And if you describe the current situation, what happens, you are around, you are defending human rights in the refugee camps, so you know the situation. And then explain us also why it happens and why this is so complicated. Okay, thank you. I will.
شكرا جزيلا سيادة النائب لتحضير هذا الاجتماع ونتحدث او نحاول ننقل بعض من واقع العراق. نشكركم لاهتمامكم بالوضع العراق وخاصة الوضع الإنساني. أكيد أي مساعدة، أي حديث، أي حركة من عندكم راح يفيدنا. إن شاء الله نقدر نصل اليوم بالعراق الأولوية هي لمحاربة ومساعدة العدد الكبير من النازحين الموجودين في العراق. بلغ اليوم عدد النازح الداخلي 2,000,000 شخص. 2,000,000 شخص بلا مأوى، بلا أكل، بلا مدارس وبلا رواتب، ويعيشون حالة مزرية وبلا مستقبل. لا يدرون ما هي المستقبل، ستكون لهم الفرصة للعودة وإعادة حياتهم. الأمر الآخر محاربة داعش، وهذه يعني قضية عسكرية، لأننا اليوم نحارب أكثر مجموعة شرسة. العالم كلها اليوم وقفت لمحاربة هذه المجموعة. أحيانا حقيقة نحن في العراق نقول إننا نحارب نيابة عن العالم، لأن داعش أحلامها ومخططاتها أكبر من المعارك داخل العراق. بالحديث عن داعش
talking about Daesh,
ما ممكن انه ما نتحدث عن الوضع السياسي بالعراق.
not speaking about the situation, political situation in Iraq.
لماذا داعش وجد لها مكان وأرضية في العراق؟
Why did Daesh find territory in Iraq and find
تعرفون بعد التغيير أو بعد سقوط النظام السابق في العراق،
after the falling of the previous regime in Iraq,
العملية السياسية صارت
the
بها
political
نجاحات لكن
process
إخفاقات
has
كبيرة.
achieved some progress, but there were many hindrances as well.
الجانب الإيجابي كان بأنه العملية الديمقراطية مستمرة وتحديدا الانتخابات.
And we have the election.
عندنا دستور
We
دائم.
have the permanent
وعندنا
constitution.
اتفاقات سياسية
And we have
لإدارة
political
الدولة.
agreements to manage the state.
الآن المشكلة مثلا بين حكومة إقليم كردستان والحكومة الاتحادية
the Kurdish region and the
سببها
federal government
عدم تطبيق
caused
الفيدرالية
by
بشكل
the
صحيح.
full implementations of the constitution in a right way.
لأنه الفيدرالية نظام
Because
سياسي جديد.
federalism is a new system for Iraq.
احنا عرفنا نظام
We
واحد،
were used to
حزب
one
واحد، دكتاتورية مركزية وحيدة.
centralized system in Iraq.
فلذلك تشوفون بين حين وآخر مشاكل بين
Now and then problems
الإقليم
arise
والحكومة الاتحادية.
between the Kurdish region
بس
and the
حقيقة
federal
هناك
government.
إرادة من
In fact, there
الطرفين
is a
بحل
will by the
مشاكلنا،
two parties to solve their problems,
وخاصة بما يتعلق بالموارد.
especially concerning the resources.
ولا تنسون انه العراق
Don't
95% مواردها نفط.
95% of the Iraqi resources coming from oil.
هذه ممكن حلها بتشريع
This
قوانين
can be solved
ومفاوضات.
by enacting laws and by negotiation.
الآن المشكلة في المكون
The
الآخر
problem
اللي هم
now
السنة
in
في
the
العراق.
other component of the Iraqi society, which is the Sunni.
السنة اليوم
The
متهمون
Sunnis
بأنهم
are
حواضن
accused
لداعش.
today they are being incubators for Daesh.
هذه بها جانبين.
This has two sides.
نعم هناك حواضن
Yes,
لداعش في
there are
المناطق السنية.
incubators for the Daesh in the Sunnis areas.
سببها انه الحكومات
The reason for that is that the
ما
government
قدرت تتعامل بشكل صحيح
was not able to deal with the Sunnis in a right way.
لأن السنة بعد تغيير النظام
Because the Sunnis, after changing the regime
شعروا
in Iraq,
بالتهميش.
they felt that they were marginalized.
بمراحل مختلفة. في
In
البداية
different
قاطعوا
stages. In the
الانتخابات
beginning,
والعملية
they
السياسية.
boycotted the political process.
ثم صارت هناك اعتصامات كثيرة
Then
في
there
المدن
was some
الرئيسية.
riots.
صار هناك حراك
And
شعبي
then there was
سني.
a Sunni movement mobilizing
على مدى هذه
their
الفترة
people.
ظهرت مجاميع
And
مسلحة
also
مختلفة،
appeared many armed groups.
بعضها إرهابية،
Some of them are terroristic.
بعضها كانت مقاومة ضد
And
الاحتلال
some of them
الأمريكي.
were really oppositions to the occupation. the
لكن
American
تحديدا
occupation.
بعد أحداث
But
سوريا،
after the events in Syria,
وطبعا أستاذ هشام راح
Mr.
يتحدث
Hisham
بأعمق عن
is
هذا
going
الموضوع.
to speak
حراك
about this
داعش.
subject in details about Daesh.
وجدوا لهم أرضية في
They
العراق.
found an incubation and a
Daesh.
territory for them in Iraq.
فهذا الحراك في سوريا
This
والعراق
movement in
دمجوا
Iraq and Syria, they
وحدث ما
were,
حدث
mixed.
بدخول داعش.
and Daesh is now
داعش يدعي انه هو يدافع عن السنة،
claiming that they are supporting or defending the Sunnis.
ولكن هذا الكلام غير
But in
صحيح.
reality, it is not true.
السنة احتموا بداعش
The
جزء منهم من
Sunnis,
البداية،
they have been seeking protections
متوقعين انه السنة
from
مدافع
Daesh
عنهم.
because they thought that they were defending them.
لكن اعطيكم امثلة
But
مثلا
I
عن
will give
موصل.
you some examples, for example, in Mosul.
نحن نتحدث عن النازحين
We are speaking
ومعاناة
about
النازحين،
IDPs and the suffering
من
of
شر
the
داعش.
IDPs from Daesh.
لكن احنا باعتقادنا الصوت
But
اللي ما
we
يوصل
believe
هو
that
صوت
the voice which is not
العراقيين اللي
reaching
تحت رحمة
is
داعش.
the voice of the Iraqis who are under the mercy of Daesh.
عندنا مئات الآلاف من الأطفال
We have
بدون مدارس
thousands of
في
children
مناطق
without
تحت سيطرة
schools
داعش،
under the
وهناك
control or the siege of
قرابة
Daesh.
المليونين عائلة
And there
بدون
are
رواتب،
almost 2 million families without salaries.
وأيضا لدينا مدارس ومستشفيات، غير المدارس مستشفيات عاطلة.
Also,
اليوم لا يوجد
hospitals which are
مستشفى
not working.
يراجعه العراقي في موصل أو في
In
أنبار
Mosul and in
عندما
Anbar,
يتمرض.
when you go to the they don't have hospitals to go to.
المستشفيات هي لخدمة
Hospitals are
مقاتلي
there to
داعش.
serve the fighters of Daesh.
غير العقوبات اللي فرضوه على الناس،
Apart from the sanctions which have been imposed on people,
هناك لائحة
there is a list
لما هو
of
يجوز وما هو لا
restrictions to what
يجوز.
is allowed and is not allowed.
وهناك مجموعة يسمون نفسهم
And there is a
الحكماء
group
الشرعيين.
which is called that the legitimate rulers,
فأي عمل يقوم به شخص
any
غير مرغوب لدى داعش،
which is undesirable for Daesh,
هؤلاء الأمراء من
those
داعش
princes, they call them princes of Daesh,
يقررون
decide
القصاص من عدمه.
the sanctions of that person, for that
القصاص
person.
أحيانا يكون
Sometimes this
جلد
is by beating them,
وأحيانا يكون الإعدام.
and sometimes it's execution.
وهذا ما يحدث لليزيديين
And this
في
is what
تلعفر
happened to the
حاليا.
Yazidis in Talafar recently.
المجموعة الأخيرة اللي تم
The
ذبحهم 47 شخص قبل كم
47
يوم
who have been slaughtered.
هم من بين المجاميع
They are
اللي
among the
هي
groups who have
يعني
been
معتقلين
captured by Daesh,
اللي رفضوا اعتناق
detained
الإسلام.
by Daesh, sorry.
رفضوا اعتناق الإسلام.
They refused to become Muslims.
فصدرت بحقهم إعدامات
So
ومع
they were
الأسف نتوقع
executed.
إعدامات قادمة في
And
الأيام
there will be
القادمة.
also coming executions in the future.
والأرقام تبلغ 4000.
And the number is reaching 4,000 now.
نرجع إلى اليزيديين
We go back to the
والمسيحيين.
Yazidis and the Christians.
اليزيدي
The
والمسيحي
Yazidis and the Christians
مستهدف كما
are
هو الآخرين،
targeted like others.
لكن هناك رسالة في استهداف هذه
There is one
المكونات.
message in targeting this.
جزء من هذه المكونات أصيلة بالعراق.
They are the original inhabitants of Iraq.
اليزيديين
The Yazidis.
الوحيدين
They
الموجودين
are
في
the only
العالم
group in the world
اللي هو دينهم
whose religion
يختلف عن
is
الآخرين
different
بالعراق.
from others
ديانة
in Iraq.
فقط مقرهم ومركزهم
Their seat and their
وأماكنهم المقدسة هي
and
مركز
their holy
رئيسيهم في
places
العراق.
is in Iraq only.
ومسيحي العراق هم
And
من
the Christians of
الأساسيين
Iraq
اللي
are
هم
also from
سلالة
the
الآشوريين
first
أول
inhabitants.
الحضارات.
They are from the Assyrians descended.
يحدثكم أستاذ هشام بالتفصيل ربما عن
Hisham will talk
هذا،
in details
لكن
about
داعش
this.
كان عندهم رسالة في
But Daesh
استهداف
had
هذه
a message
المكونات
in targeting those people,
لجلب
those
التحالف
components,
إلى
to bring the
العراق.
coalition to Iraq,
ولينطي لنفسه الشرعية
to give itself the legitimacy
ليقتل
to kill
باسم
in the name
الخلافة والإسلام
of the
وغيرها،
caliphates and the name of Islam.
لأنه داعش يعرف بأنه
Because Daesh,
أوروبا
they know very well
تتحرك وهذه قضايا حساسة،
that these
حقوق
are very
والأقليات
sensitive things
والمكونات.
about the minorities, that they can use this for their benefit.
لكن في الواقع
But in fact,
العراقيين كلهم مستهدفين
the
من
Iraqis
داعش.
they are all targeted by Daesh.
اليوم عندنا ما
Today,
يقارب
we have
مليونين
almost
نازح
2
داخلي
million IDPs in Iraq,
في معسكرات.
in camps.
المسيحيين هم في
The
كنائس
Christians are seeking shelters in
كما ذكرت،
churches.
ماكو رواتب، ماكو
As I told,
مدارس،
as I mentioned, there were no
ماكو
schools, there were no salaries.
يعني بعض أكثرهم يعانون أمراض
Most of them
مزمنة،
are suffering
لا
from
يستطيعون أن يحصلوا
chronic
على الأدوية.
diseases and they cannot get medicine.
كثير منهم يحتاجون إلى عمليات
Lots of
وليس
them need
لديهم أموال.
operations, but they have no money to
حقيقة
pay for
لا
the
حكومة إقليم
operations.
كردستان
Neither the
ولا
region of
الاتحادية
Kurdistan, the government of the Kurdistan
عندهم
region,
هذه
neither the
الإمكانية
federal have the ability
لتقديم
or the
المساعدة لهم.
possibility to give them help.
مع العلم أنا بوجهة نظري وأكثركم زرتوا العراق
Most
وزرتوا
of
إقليم
them perhaps
كردستان،
have visited Kurdistan
قدمت
and
لهم
Iraq.
حكومة إقليم كردستان
The
ما يجب
Kurdistan
أن
region have
يقدمه
given
قدر
them
المستطاع،
as they can.
ولكن هذا لا يكفي
But this
طبعا.
is not enough.
المشكلة بأن هؤلاء
The
ليس
problem is
لديهم
that
أمل
those
بالعودة
have no
باستمرار
hope to
داعش
return and the
مع
continuity
استمرارهم.
of the fights with Daesh.
بالعكس الآن هناك
On the
هجرة
contrary,
تهجير آخر من
There
موصل
is another
من الذين
sort
بقوا.
of immigrations from those who were remains in Mosul.
السبب أهل
The
موصل
reason that the people of Mosul,
بعضهم في البداية
some of them in the beginning,
رحبوا بداعش
they
بالمناسبة،
welcome Daesh,
معتقدين أنه داعش يخلصهم كما
hoping that
بينا.
they will help them to get rid of the
الآن بعد هاي
militias.
الممارسات اللي
But
مارسها
after all
داعش،
these practices of Daesh,
مثلا من ضمن
For
الأشياء اللي
example,
ذكرتها أذكر لكم بأنه هناك من يدعى أنه وزير تربية في الحكومة في الدولة
claims that
الإسلامية،
he is a minister of
أبو القرون.
education
أبو
in
القرنين،
Islam.
the two horn, that's
Two
his.
horns. His name is the two horn.
في بداية المدارس دخل المدارس الإعدادية للبنات
When starting the
وفرض ختان البنات
secondary
مثلا.
school
إجباري.
for girls, they really have asked to circumcise girls, and that was obligatory.
وهي غير المشاكل الأخرى اللي هي
Apart from other
الحجاب.
problems like hijab,
المشكلة الآن في
the
الشباب
problem now
الصغار
comes in the youth.
يجندون إجباريا في
They were
معسكرات داعش
really enlisted with Daesh,
ويحضرونهم
and they
للقتال.
are preparing them to fight.
الحمد لله هسه هي ما أقدر أقول الحمد لله ولا أنه هذه كلها منشورة على الصفحات وعلى الويب سايت ممكن تشوفوها.
You can follow them.
احنا نسمعها من شاهد من
We hear them
يلزمون
from
من داعش.
witnesses who have run away from Daesh.
المشكلة في اليزيديات.
Problems in the Yazidis women.
ساعدونا في خلاص المتبقيات فيه. أرجوكم هذه أكبر مطلب.
To save them, the remaining women, help them.
والذين خرجوا من قبضة داعش
And those who were able to free
يعانون من
themselves
حالة
from the hold
نفسية.
of Daesh, they are suffering psychologically.
جزء كبير من عندهم مرحب بهم في عوائلهم.
They were welcome, some of them were welcomed again in their families.
ولكن هناك من لا يزال عنده مشاكل من التعايش مرة أخرى بين بيته وعائلته.
of really returning to normal life within their own families.
المشكلة أغلب الفتيات
Most of the girls,
بجانب التعذيب النفسي والجسدي تعرضوا إلى
apart from the
اعتداء جنسي.
psychological torture, they were sexually assaulted.
فيخشون الحديث لأي شخص.
They are afraid to talk about that to anybody.
لكن اللجنة البرلمانية
But the
للمرأة
Parliamentarian Committee
في
for Women
الحكومة الاتحاد يعني
and
في
the federal
بغداد
government in Baghdad
والحكومة إقليم
and
كردستان
in Kurdistan region,
بدأوا منذ فترة
they
بتوفير
started
كل هذه
recently
المعلومات.
to
عملوا
document
جهد
all
مهم.
this information.
نحب أن نشارككم أو
We would like to
نشارككم ونرسل
participate
لكم
that with you,
بعض من
to share
هذه
that with you,
التقارير
some of these reports,
لأنه أكيد تساعدكم في
because it
كيفية
will help
الدعم.
you to support.
ألمانيا على
As
سبيل المثال
Germany, for example,
ستستقبل
will
1000
receive
يزيدية
1,000 Yazidi women
من مع عوائلهم طبعا.
with their families, of course,
1000 مع العوائل لتأهيلهم
to
نفسيا مرة
rehabilitate
أخرى.
them again, psychologically.
نعتقد هذا مهم جدا.
And I think that this is
نتمنى
very
الدول الأخرى
important,
أوروبية
and I
تتبنى
hope
هذه
that
القضية.
the rest of the
لليزيديات.
countries will follow this example.
أنا أقول اليزيديين
I say
ديانتهم
that
غير
the Yazidis
مسلمة.
are not Muslims.
والله أنا أعتقد لأنهم كانوا مسلمين ربما الكثير من هاي الفتيات لو رجعوا كانوا حتى بيوتهم أو عوائلهم عقبتهم.
So if they come back, they become Muslim, perhaps their own families will
في
punish
بيئتنا
them.
يعتبر هذا الشيء
This
يعني
is
عار.
not accepted. This is a shame when
ولكن
you
اليزيديون
leave your
كانوا
religion and
أشجع
take other
وأقوى من
religions, but they
المسلمين
were,
حقيقة.
they were very courageous, even more courageous than the Muslims.
لأن أغلبهم يعني أزواج رحبوا بزوجاتهم
Because
وآباء
most of the
ورحبوا
husbands, they
ببناتهم
welcome
والإخوان
back their wives and their
مقدرين
daughters.
حجم المأساة اللي
They
تعرضوا لها.
really, they were caring about the kind of the problems they were going through. Or they
يعني
was
أذكر
women.
نقطتين بسرعة لأنه ما أريد آخذ من وقت
Mention two
الآخرين.
points, important points, but I'm not to take a lot of your time.
هناك سؤال ربما عندنا
There is
ولكن
one
عندكم
question,
أيضا.
perhaps,
كيف نتعامل مع الأرض المحررة الآن
deal
اللي
with
تتحرر
the
من داعش؟
liberated areas, liberated from Daesh.
لأن أعرف تسمعون أخبار
Because you hear some
بأنه
of the news that some
المجاميع
areas
المسلحة
that the armed groups
تقترب جرائم
have
أو حالات
committed
انتقام.
perpetrated crimes and also revenge.
هذه نقراها قراءتين من
we
جانبين.
read in two ways.
لا ننكر بأنه حالات
We do not
انتهاك
deny
موجودة
that
كانت
there is some
في ديالى
violation
وفي تكريت.
in Diyala and in Tikrit.
لكن أكو حالة أخرى هناك
But
كثير
there
من
is
أهالي
another
هذه
situation.
المناطق
Many of the inhabitants of
على
these
مدى
areas
السنوات
for
الماضية
the last years,
تأذوا من عوائل معينة
they
موجودة
were
هناك
harmed by some certain families who are
اللي
there.
أبنائهم كلهم أفراد مقاتلين داخل
Whose
داعش.
sons are fighters within Daesh.
مثلا أنا باعتبار نائبة فتجيني رجوات
member of the
كثيرة
parliament. I
أنه
have lots
أخرج
of
عوائل
informations
من تكريت
to
إلى
save some
كركوك
families to move them from Tikrit to Kirkuk,
أو من ديالى
or
إلى
from
مناطق
Diyala
أخرى
to
في
other
سليمانية.
areas in Suleymania.
أغلب هاي العوائل هم
Most
نساء
of these
فقط.
families, they are only women.
الرجال ما يجون.
Men do not come.
وبعد ذلك نكتشف أنه الرجال هم
After that, we
مقاتلين
discover
في
that
ضمن
their
داعش.
husbands are fighters with
فحقيقة
Daesh.
أهالي هاي المنطقة
So the people of that area,
يخافون من عودة
they are
هؤلاء.
afraid of those coming back to them.
ولذلك تسمعون مرات بأن
Therefore, you
الحكومة أو
hear
البيشمركة
sometimes that
تمنع
the
عودة
government and the Peshmerga
الأهالي إلى هذه
forbid
المناطق.
them from coming back to those
الحقيقة هي
areas.
هذه.
This is the reality.
لكن هذا لا يعني أنه لا
But
يوجد
this
حالات
does not mean
انتقام.
that there are no cases of
وهذا
revenge.
يجعلني
They
أن
exist.
أتحدث عن النقطة
And this
الأخيرة
will lead us to speak about the
أنه
final
نحن
point
عاجزين عن تحقيق
that we
مصالحة
are
وطنية
unable to
حقيقية بالعراق.
achieve a real national reconciliation in Iraq.
أصعب المهمات وأنا
This is
فيها
one
من
of the most
2006
difficult missions
السؤال مع من
The
نتصالح.
question is with whom are we going to reconcile?
لدينا مجاميع
We have groups
في الحكومة
in the government
ترفض التصالح مع بقايا
refuse
حزب
to
البعث
reconcile with the people who are the remaining from the Ba'ath Party.
لأنه البعث محظور بالدستور العراقي.
Because the Ba'ath Party is prohibited in our constitution.
ولذلك عدم تحقيق مصالحة.
Therefore, not achieving a reconciliation,
مشاكلنا السياسية تبقى.
our political problems will stay.
وهذا طبعا له تأثير مباشر
And
على
this will
الوضع
have a
الأمني.
direct influence on the
ولا سمح
security
الله
situation. And if
نمو
God
وبقاء
forbids
الإرهابيين
that if
وتحديدا
the
داعش.
terrorists will stay and Daesh will stay.
تسألون عن تحرير موصل ربما.
You perhaps ask about the liberation of Mosul.
أصعب مرحلة بالنسبة
This is
لنا
the
تحرير
most
موصل.
difficult point is liberating Mosul.
هشام سيطلع
Hisham is
على
going to
تحضيرات.
speak to that in details about the preparations
هذه
for
مسألة
liberating
حساسة.
Mosul. This is a very sensitive subject.
اليوم الجيش ضعيف بالعراق.
Today the army in Iraq is weak.
نحن نحتاج التحالف
We
الدولي.
need the international coalition.
البيشمركة من جهة
Peshmerga on one side.
يقاتلون
They
بشكل
are
واضح،
fighting
لكن
strongly
يحتاجون
there.
أسلحة
They
ودعم.
need weapon and they need support.
وعندنا ميليشيات
And
أو
we have
عفوا حشد شعبي.
militias or popular mobilization. That's the
لكن لدينا
militias.
أكثر من 30 مجموعة.
But we have more than 30 groups in this mobilization movement.
حتى رئيس وزرائنا
Even our prime minister
ما عنده سيطرة عليهم جميعا.
cannot control all these groups.
بعض هذه
Some
المجاميع
of these groups
تدار من قبل
are
إيران
run by Iran
مباشرة،
directly,
دعمهم، أموالهم
supported financially
وأسلحتهم.
and with weapons.
أسلحتهم متطورة
They
ومهمة
have
أكثر من
very
الأسلحة
developed
الموجودة لدى
weapons,
الجيش.
even more developed than the
بعضها
weapons of the Iraqi army.
تدعم من مثلا حزب
Some
الله.
of them are supported by Hezbollah.
الآن رئيس الوزراء حائر
The prime minister is now
في تحرير الأنبار
is
والموصل.
between two things. On one side, liberating Mosul.
in liberating موصل and أنبار المختار هو
Yeah.
لأنه هو يحتاج التحالف الدولي.
Liberating Mosul and Anbar. On one side, he needs the international coalition.
لأن سماء العراق بيد التحالف.
Because the sky is in the hand of the Americans and the coalition, and specifically the Americans.
وفي أرض الواقع
And
الحشد
on the
الشعبي
ground
موجود.
is the mobilization movement.
الحشد الشعبي جزء من عندهم خاصة هاي المجامع
Some of those
المرتبطة بإيران.
groups who are related or connected to Iran
ترفض أمريكا
refuse to deal with the participations of the American in fighting Daesh.
وأمريكا
And America, on
بل
the other
أبلغوا
hand,
رئيس وزرائنا في
and our
واشنطن
prime minister was in Washington recently,
والأمريكان أبلغوه
and the American have
أنهم
informed
لن
them
يضربوا
that
داعش
they
من
are
الجو
not going to hit
داعش
from the sky
if هاي المجاميع
if this group
الإيرانية شاركت.
continues to participate. The groups which are belonging to Iran continue to participate.
فأنا أخيرا رسالتنا
So
لكم
our final
نحتاج
message
دعم
is that we need help,
في مساعدة
support
اللاجئين.
in helping refugees.
هناك مدن
There are some
في
cities
إقليم كردستان
in Kurdistan region.
نسبة النازحين بها
The
أكثر من
percentage of the
البوبوليشن
IDPs
الأصلي
is
مال
even
المدينة.
more than the original people living there.
ومثل ما قلت في
As
الوضع
I have
الاقتصادي
said,
الموجود
that the economic situation there
ونزول أسعار النفط
is
وإذا
very
عجز
bad, and
بالموازنة.
also because of the prices of the oil now
وأساسا حكومة
it has
إقليم
caused
كردستان
some
ما
deficit
تستلم
in the
موازنتها
budget
تماما من بغداد،
in Baghdad.
فدعم هؤلاء جدا
So
مهم.
supporting these people is very important.
شكرا.
And thank you.
Thank you very much.
شكرا جزيلا.
Before I ask you for your questions, I would ask Hisham for his contribution, and then
هشام
both contributions are
ثم
open for
هناك
discussion.
مشاركات من الحضور.
Floor is yours.
الكلام لك الآن، الكلمة سيد هشام.
شكرا جزيلا لحضوركم. حقيقة اليوم كلام عن داعش كلام طويل، لكن نتكلم اليوم على نازل الوقت أو وصيلة الوقت. العراق بشكل عام يتكون من مكونات كثيرة، الكرد والعرب والسنة والعرب والشيعة، وفيه أقليات التركمان، المسيحيين، المسيحيين، ثم الشبك والجزيرية والأصالة، ثم البحائية، ثم الكاكا. هذه الأقليات minority in number, but they are the building blocks of a new Iraq. Kurds are, of course, the old components of Iraq, but Arabs in general arrived in Iraq with the Islamic conquest in the 7th century. It's a country of minorities by its very nature. All Arabs are being hosted historically with regards to Daesh and the extremist Salafi movements. Why are they attacking the Yazidis or targeting the Yazidis specifically? I don't want to speak about the Christians in general because they had been displaced initially in Nainawa and Tarkit and other areas where they have now been liberated by the Peshmerga. And some of these Christians have gone back, although some of them have refused to go back because they're afraid that Daesh will reconquer these areas. Daesh has lost its initial cause. It used to say that it declared a khilafah, but it has found no crusader enemy, as he calls it, which is the international coalition or American or European armies, and so he wanted to attack a minority that is a peaceful minority, which is the Yazidis. The Yazidis have been targeted before by Al-Qaeda in Iraq, and they were targeted not in a big way or a widespread way in 2007, 2008, 10 and 11. They were targeted by terrorist attacks. But today the targeting of the Yazidis is genocidal. It was to remove them, to uproot them, so they remain, none of them would remain. The attack started on the 9th of August 2014. ISIS attacked, or Daesh attacked the Yazidi cities, and they arrested 17,000 men, at least. Those were suspected of carrying arms, and they were removed to 4 different detention centers in Baj, which is in the northwest of Nainawa, another one in the south of Nainawa, and then the prison where they are carrying out the executions, Talaf, and the 4th one. These were 7,000 fighters of the Yazidis, and then they obtained other fatwas where they divided the rest of the Yazidi community into 3 different groups. Firstly, women, and women became a merchandise, which every mujahid, every fighter amongst these extremists, Kurds, who participated in the liberation or occupation of an area, any house he entered, he would own all the women in that house. And on this basis, they established a slave market. Yes, a specific slave market for selling women. And in their electronic publication, Dabik, they issued a price list for these women. And this price list was declared in the media, and they've issued several surveys of these prices, and prices that were dependent on the age. From 17 to 20 years old, the price was $1,500. And there were also, all these sales were accompanied by religious instructions. From 20 to 25 years old, women were sold for $1,000. 26 to 30 years old, they were sold for $500. And older ones are for service only, i.e. they're kind of additional extra, but they were given away for free with the purchase of the younger ones. And in this way, they treated women, and they treated women as merchandise. Females have no decision in in practicing sex with those fighters. The fighters were given the freedom to do what they wanted with these women. And after that, after they've used them for a month or so, they would sell them on for more or less than they paid for them. Also, part of their religious instructions was that they could offer them up for auction, for sale in auction, where a group of those who wished to buy would join the auction. And the females that refused to be used sexually in this way were subjected to floggings, 10 lashes a day, and if they continued to refuse, the man would have the right to either sell them on or kill them. And this, we've seen cases of this in 3 areas in Mosul, in the Sukkar district, where women were killed because of this, in Al Jamia district also, and also in Old Mosul. They have killed some of the girls who have refused to practice sex with them, even under force. With regards to the men, they also divided men into different categories. Men who fought against ISIS. All the men in that home would be killed, and young boys from 11 or over, those who have become pubescent with pubic hair were killed, also according to this instruction, because a member of the males of this household participated in fighting Daesh. Homes where men didn't participate in fighting Daesh, those were divided also again into 2 different categories. One were sent to Tal Afr in a camp, and others were sent to another camp in Tiyara. In the Tal Afr camp, it was for people who had given a chance to repent. To repent, which means that they are given instruction, religious instruction, education, a course for 3 months. And if they responded and adopted Islam, then they were released, and then were obliged to, in fact, take up weapons and fight for ISIS. And many of them were forced, even last Saturday, some of them were forced to kill their own people in order to have blood on their hands. And they become implicated in the crimes of ISIS. The Darbek magazine and Furqan Foundation have published the pictures of those who've carried out those executions in order to implicate. The other camps are those who did not accept at all to adopt Islam, to repent as they call it, and those were taken to an area called Al-Ba'aj, which is in the desert. And there's at least 5,000 of them, and those will be executed in groups. According to my information, they've killed so far around 1,600 of those. And those are the men, according to Daesh, those are 11 years or older. So they're all treated as all these males from 11 upwards are treated as men. And they've started their executions, and they've recorded films of those executions. Daesh will not leave the minorities alone and will drain them and will dry them up. ISIS knows, or Daesh knows, that the minorities affect the conscience of Westerners and of the Americans especially, and are the focus of international communities, international opinion. And so Daesh is agitating European public opinion through using these minorities in this way. And in my opinion, the minorities were not a strategic objective in themselves of ISIS, but they were a means of agitating Europeans and the United States and all the communities around the world that are humanitarian and liberal. And the idea is to attract them to Iraq, to bring them to Iraq to fight in Iraq, and then the Khalifa Baghdadi of ISIS then becomes the one who is fighting the Crusaders, legitimizing him. And this creates a myth. They believe there will be a battle, the end of times, according to their religious mythology, that there would be a battle between them and the Crusaders, the Christians, and in my opinion, that the Yazidis are simply a tool to agitate the international community. Daesh has become also a social phenomenon, and if the international community does not stand as one body, one hand against them, firstly to save the minorities, what remains of them, and secondly to fight ISIS as a social phenomenon in the region. And it's not beyond imagination that Daesh will come to Europe one day. There is migration in the opposite direction. Those who went to Iraq from Europe, went to Iraq and Syria to fight with ISIS and now are coming back to Europe and were unable to stay and stayed in Gaziantep in Turkey, in the south of Turkey, and received a lot of training, a lot of extremism training. And even if they haven't been able to enter Syria and Iraq, they're still coming back full of hatred and proud of what his colleagues, what other ISIS fighters are doing in the exploitation of Yazidi women and the killing of Yazidi children. They're proud of this. And this is a big problem. And I would say that the Yazidis, the project, Daesh's project is genocidal against them. And many of the Yazidis who have adopted Islam who are obliged to or forced to adopt Islam, and they change their names. So the Daesh wants not only to eradicate the Yazidis, but to uproot their history and lineage in Iraq. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So I open the floor now for questions. Especially happy that one of my colleagues, Eugen Freund, is here. He's from the Foreign Affairs Committee. So Eugen, if you want to start.
Thank you very much.
شكرا جزيلا.
Both Mrs. Talabani and
Said Hashimi.
It's very gripping stories that you told us.
الذي استحوذ على اهتمامنا جناب.
As Mr. Weidenholzer has already pointed out, we know pretty much, and with what you're telling us, we're even better informed about what's going on. But there is so little in concrete terms what we can do, what the Europeans can do. I think, and this has been my goal ever since I started in the European Parliament, is to reinvigorate the European foreign policy in order to have a vigorous debate about more European injection into the peace process of the Middle East, of the greater area of the Middle East. I have been criticizing the European Union for its lack of engagement in this area. We have become the payer in many areas, but we've never been the player. And we hope, and there is some positive signal that the new head of the European foreign policy, Mrs. Mogherini, will change that. That Europe will play a more important and active role. Active role in the Middle East, in the Near East, as you would call it. But come back to the very issue that we're debating, the Yazidi women. I came across a story, I don't know exactly where it was, yesterday, 2 days ago, of a very similar subject that Mr. Hashimi talked about. It's women being sold and resold and even sold one more time. And at the end, there was a group or there was a single person, I don't recall that exactly, that ended up with a doctor. And the doctor brought this woman, he bought this woman and he brought this woman to a place where she could tell her story. He was not interested in sex with her, but he wanted to save her. And I just wanted to know if this is a sort of a similar case, or do you hear of more people that would venture into this, you know, to buy a woman in order to save that? If that is just a small positive glimpse, or if there is something that may evolve into a better story that we need to hear more of. Thank you very much.
Thank you again. I'm just wondering whether we should collect some questions and remarks and then answer. Just indicate who wants to raise something. 1, 2. There are not so many, so I think we can do it on an individual basis. Yeah? Who wants?
أكيد.
Okay.
شوف عفوا. لا احنا نثمن دور اوروبا اقله بموضوع النازحين قدمت
ITPs. Europe has provided a lot of financial support, and I have seen a lot of European missions that have brought assistance, and I've accompanied them personally, and we've given this assistance to the refugee camps. But as parliamentarians, you could actually influence the policies of your own countries towards the region. For example, today in Iraq, we can't say to Turkey, stop your interference or stop terrorists from coming through Turkey. So when we've heard Chancellor Merkel talking about this subject once, it's clear that no one knows that the terrorists that are coming to Syria and Iraq are going through Turkish territories, and there are offices in Turkey that are facilitating their movement into Iraq. And we appreciate the international communities and the UN initiative which your countries participated in drying up the financial resources of Daesh. Daesh is now a state. It has its own resources and its own finance, but its money, its finances come from other countries. And if we picked up the subject with our neighboring countries, we will have problems as the Iraqi government. We already have a lot of problems with our neighboring countries. And this is an issue potentially that the EU and the EAS could assist, and your own countries could also assist in this particular issue, the financing of ISIS from some of our neighboring countries. For your question, specifically, yes, there are people, there are some of our tribal leaders who are buying Yazidi women from Daesh in order to liberate them. And the Kurdish government specifically paid a lot of money to some individuals to buy these women and release them. So we have a large number of Yazidi women who have returned under this scheme, and the Kurdish region government have paid a lot of money through intermediaries to some of the tribal leaders in Mosul to buy these women and return them. And some have even done this completely voluntarily. Some individuals have done it voluntarily. In our parliamentary commission for women in both Kurdistan and Baghdad, we have recorded a lot of the stories and some of these recorded a lot of the testimonies of a lot of these liberated women, and they told us how they were released and how they were able to come out. I can give you some examples. Sheikh Ahmed Al-Ta'i, who lives in Dahok, and he's from the Thai tribe, and he has managed to rescue more than 50 Yazidi women through his own tribe, and he was able to buy them, and it was his own money. It was he did this voluntarily. There's also a group, a civil society group that's very active inside Nainawa. Its leader is called Maurice. This is his nom de guerre, but we know who he is. And they have been able to release more than 150 Yazidi women. There's also a movement of Ishaq al-Zaidi that has also released a very large number of women, and there's also some of the tribal leaders of Ainza, of Shammar, and they were able to release also at least 150 women. And some have been able to reach the Kurdish area, and some are looking for their own families. Of course, one of the problems is that people can't find each other. People don't know where their families are. There is no central record. There's no organization that is helping these families to find each other in Iraq. Daesh, when it realized what was going on, especially after the 23rd of July 2014, has started has closed down the auctions and the slave market to those who were not recommended by other ISIS groups, ISIS individuals. So no outsiders can come in and buy some of these slaves, because ISIS realized what was going on, and so has closed this market to only those who can achieve a recommendation from another ISIS member.
Thank you.
Thank you very much to the SMZ group for organising this. My name is Matthew Robinson. I'm on behalf of David Campbell-Bannerman, who's the chairman of the Iraq delegation.
Can you
Okay, yeah. I'm here on behalf of David Campbell-Bannerman, who's the chairman of the Iraq delegation here in the Parliament. We had an event on a very similar topic, which you were present in Strasbourg. Some incredibly emotional and harrowing eyewitness accounts. My question is, it touches on what you said about the actions of targeting ethnic groups by ISIS is an act of deliberate provocation to entice the West to perhaps get more and more militarily involved. You hear a lot of speculation about what is needed militarily, whether it's greater air support or greater support to the Peshmerga with arms, some people even calling for boots on the ground. What hits the right note in terms of military involvement for the West that is not counterproductive to those on the ground and everyday Iraqis, but at the same time is efficient enough that actually can effectively target ISIS? Thank you.
Thank you. Another question on the same line? Do not hesitate to ask. Okay, so who wants to answer? Him first, please.
Well, any foreign intervention on the ground in Iraq will agitate the Shiite. A lot of the Shiite armed groups have said in their satellite channels and in many of their forums, publicly they have said that once there is a foreign intervention, they will declare jihad against such intervention, especially the Hezbollah groups and Asad al-Haq and Badr and the Khorasani brigades. These are the groups that the United States and the international coalition considers a red line. They themselves have said that once the West arrives militarily, they will declare jihad against it. And this will create a new crisis, a new problem. Iraq is already divided enough and cannot withstand such a crisis. The international community, coalition, using airstrikes, its operations are still very precise. Its strikes are very precise, but they're very slow as well. And the strategy requires a long period of time. whilst rescuing and saving the Yazidis, men and women, requires a force on the ground. The international community is avoiding any targeting of ISIS or its prisons. The prisons that have Yazidis in them, in order to avoid killing Yazidis. And the executions carried out by ISIS are being carried out in mosques and in hospitals and in churches. And the international community can't target those areas. So we should create a trained force that can go in and rescue those prisoners, and they should be formed of the Sunni tribes and of Peshmerga, exclusively. The support shouldn't be necessary in order to fight Daesh. Shouldn't be just in the form of weapons. Of course, you need weapons, and the army and the Peshmerga cannot operate without weapons. Of course, the number of Iraqi weapons that are now in the hands of ISIS, these brand new weapons never used before, it's a huge quantity. And now the Shia mobilization movement has more advanced weapons than those in the hands of the Iraqi army and the Peshmerga. The Iraqi army and the Peshmerga only have Kalashnikovs, and they do need weapons. But they also need advice and support for the Peshmerga and the Iraqi army, because fighting terrorism requires, it's an art, and it requires technical advances and good methods, and we don't have that in our army and the Peshmerga, because also the fight against terrorism requires intelligence, which we don't have. Another problem is that the areas that are being liberated by the army and by Peshmerga and the Shiite militias, and the areas of Kirkuk and elsewhere, what we have seen is that when Daesh or ISIS, when they leave an area, they leave booby traps. They booby trap everything. Homes, schools, shops, hospitals, and so many Peshmerga and army personnel are killed after liberation. When they enter hospitals or homes, the bombs go off and the buildings collapse on their heads. So we don't have the technical know-how to dismantle these booby traps, and this is for an example of the areas you could assist us in.
Thank you. The main challenge actually will be Mosul.
التحدي الكبير أعتقد سيكون في الموصل لأنها مدينة كبيرة.
If it falls, Daesh, it would be a sign that they are defeated. So my question is actually, you always hear this all the days that people are preparing to liberate Mosul, but it never happened until now. So can it happen? Under which conditions? Who is taking part? And if it happens, because I think there are a million people living there, this is a fight house by house. This is something like Stalingrad, whatever. So this is something inconceivable. But if this happens, what will be after this? So can people after these upcoming fights still reconcile? Can they still shake hands? Or after all these things which have to be done in this context, will they ever be able to reach out their hands for reconciliation? So this would be my question.
أكيد موصل أكبر وأصعب المعارك راح تكون. الآن التركيز الحكومة على
The
الأنبار.
focus of the government is on Anbar province. Anbar is a vast province. It's on the borders of Saudi Arabia and Syria and Jordan.
وهذا يمهد
And this, and you need to liberate Anbar to get to Mosul. And in my opinion, Mosul is not on the agenda in the near future for a number of reasons. Firstly, Anbar needs to be liberated first. Secondly, as you mentioned yourself, that Anbar has over 1 million, 1.5 million, in fact, people living there. And it will be indeed a street for a house-to-house fight. Daesh are fortified in the schools and the hospitals and in the abandoned homes. The people who have left Mosul, Daesh would reoccupy a house in the middle of other houses where people are living, families are living. So attacking these houses would be very difficult, and we don't want to liberate Mosul at the cost of so many victims, of course. And therefore that's a problem. And for me personally, for my information, the International Alliance hasn't made a decision yet. And so we need the support of Peshmerga on the one hand from the borders of Kurdistan region, and also support of the army, and also Sunni forces from within the Anbar province. Now the number of Sunni individuals who've left the police and the army in Mosul are being trained in Kurdistan at the moment, but it's a very small number, and they don't have the weapons that they need. The other issue, which is also important and interesting, which is how do we deal with the liberated areas and the liberated individuals. And the revenge is expected, revenge actions will be expected, and we are seeing it already in the refugee camps in the Kurdish area, because some Yazidi families have firm information that members of the tribes that lived in their areas assisted Daesh in kidnapping their daughters and sending them. But these revenge actions were rare. But certainly after the liberation of Mosul, there's no guarantee that such revenge wouldn't take place. With all those weapons that will be with everybody, every group will have weapons after such a battle. And by the way, Sunnah would not accept the Shiite militias entering Mosul. Neither would the Peshmerga accept it, because of this issue, because of this revenge fear, the fear of revenge.
Sorry.
The liberation of Nainawa wouldn't be easy. Even for the international coalition, there's great calculations beforehand. And as we've just heard from His Excellency the MEP, Nainawa is a very complex issue, and Daesh gives it, Daesh gives it a great deal of importance. It's very symbolic for them, and it is there that Baghdadi announced the Khilafah, the establishment of his Khilafah in the Nainawa province, and it is almost holy grounds for Daesh. And they've divided the province of Nainawa to 3 different areas, and it's clear that they will fight 3 different battles in the north and the east. They've dug a trench 43 kilometers on one side and 51 kilometers on the other side. In the heart of Nainawa province, they've brought in foreign fighters from Chechnya, and from Libya, with determined fighters who are there to die, not for spoils.
whilst in the northern, in the western area, they've also brought Syrian fighters and Libyan fighters, and they call this Al Jazeera province of Nainawa. In the south of Nainawa, they brought in tribal persons from the Salafi tribes. They're very extremists. We have the names Jabur Al-Hamdoun and others, and Mtawid and Rabid. These are very extremist tribes. And Bani Twed is one of those who've assisted Daesh in its attack on the Yazidis. So Daesh has a strategy. It's prepared for the liberation and the fight of Nainawa. And as an observer, I would say that the liberation of Nainawa can only come from within, and with the pressure from Peshmerga and Sunni tribes, and with an air cover from the international coalition. And how do we achieve this? From internally. We have activists who are living in these areas under Daesh. We are organized, and they were able to provide intelligence information, and that information led to the targeting of 7 leaders in Daesh. And this network of these youth are prepared to start a revolution if they were properly assisted and properly used and prepared for this action. And I would say that the central government's interference and the Shiite militias' interference would actually undermine the liberation of Mosul, and the international community, of course, is not going to put boots on the ground. And so 50% of the potential forces we could use, which is the central government and the Shiite militias, not going to join. And also Peshmerga is not going to join. And the Sunni tribes is not going to participate either. And so even before we start the battle, we've lost it. If we are going to rely solely on military attack. And if the Shiite militias join in, this will actually serve Daesh. Many of the Sunni armed groups support Daesh in Tikrit. After they started off by actually fighting Daesh, but actually ended up joining Daesh because of what the Shiite militias did. And in my opinion, the solution should be to exploit the Sunni opposition inside the Daesh area. There is 1.5 million people living under Daesh. And no one is, and only about 5% of them are convinced of Daesh's ideology. The Mosul society is a civil society, civilian society. It is not very religious. It's not extremist. Yes, maybe they pray and they practice Islam, but they are tolerant. The civilization, culture of Mosul is very old. The Yazidis have never suffered as they suffered now in the past. And the problem is coming from the suffering is because of the foreigners, those who came in from other areas, and it's not an indigenous issue.
Thank you very much. I have one request from Eugen. Are there other people who want to take the floor because we're coming to your last chance? Okay,
I would like to very briefly stay on that subject of military that both of you mentioned. You talked about Anbar province, which has to be the next in order to get closer to Mosul. There seems to be a rapid deterioration of the fighting capabilities of the Iraqi army. We have seen that initially, we saw that initially with ISIS overrunning a battalion in the north and capturing their weapons, and most of these soldiers were just fleeing and dispersing and leaving the weapons behind so that ISIS could get arms that they would never be able to get in a regular way. Is that something that the Iraqi government is also concerned about, because most of my knowledge comes from the American side, who have recently studied that and were really concerned about that all their efforts in rearming and putting sort of a regular Iraqi army on the ground has gone up in hot air, literally in the desert. So is it something that the Iraqi, both parliament and government, are talking about and trying to solve in any way? Thank you.
Thank you. And because there are no other requests, I would also ask you to conclude answering this question and make your concluding remarks. I would say
سؤال مهم. نعم، الآن الموضوع بناء جيش قوي والتسويق من أولويات الحكومة العراقية. الحكومة قلقة بهذا الشأن لأن احنا أغلب أسلحتنا صار فيها داعش، خاصة
Daesh, especially after the fall of Mosul. Don't forget that the American in 2003 in Iraq, they dissolved the Iraqi army. And this was one of the wrong decisions taken by the Americans. So to rebuild an army was not an easy. The army built after 2003 is not really loyal to the government, but loyal to people. Therefore, they couldn't stand in Mosul. This is one of the problems. To build an army which had loyalty to the country. Therefore, the success achieved by the Peshmerga is greater because the Peshmerga have loyalties to the country, and they fought even without salaries. For 4 months, the Peshmerga did not have salaries, and they fought and they become martyrs. This does not exist in the Iraqi army because the Iraqi army afterwards was built on loyalties to persons and to sectarians. Then there is the project of the national Guard. We want to transfer the mobilizing movement, the Shiite militia, in the legal framework. But to pass this law is also a problem. The example is there, the draft of the law is there in the parliament, and it is discussed in the Committee of the Security and Defense. And we as presidents of the blocks, political blocks, we have discussed that in our sessions to put a legal framework for the militias, because we are afraid that in the coming periods that all these armed groups who belongs to parties and who have the weapons in their hands will create future problems between in the future elections. According to me, the future elections in Iraq will face the problem of these armed groups who will really run the elections and they will win in these elections. But the problem is that to whom these national guards will follow, who will run that, who will move that National Guard. This is to be discussed in the parliament, but we have to enact a law for the National Guard. On the other side is to arm the Peshmerga. This is very important. The Peshmerga is a regular army and part of the Iraqi defense system, and they fight on 1,200 kilometers. Up to now, we have 2,000 martyrs and 5,000 wounded. Therefore, arming them, which is the most important part. But there are also problems in this respect. In short, last week, when there was a trial to arm the Peshmerga and the Sunnis directly, it was being refused by the Shiite in the parliament, and they have issued a decision to refuse the Congress resolution. Therefore, we, the Kurds and the Sunnis, we did not vote for this Iraqi resolution because we find that it's important to arm the Peshmerga and the Sunnis. To liberate Mosul and Anbar should be liberated by its own people. Therefore, we did not vote and we left the parliament, and there were lots of problems about this voting. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I will say something very quickly. The reason for the retreat of the Iraqi joint forces 2013 up till now is due to reasons the army, choosing army and a soldier is not the Americans. It had been chosen by the parties, and they have been influenced.
فقد هذا الجيش عقيدته الوطنية، عقيدته العسكرية. هو جاء ويحسب الفضل لقوميته، طائفته، السياسي. إذن هو أراد أن يخدم ويرجع الفضل لا للوطن، يرجع الفضل لهؤلاء، لهذه الأجزاء. أيضا الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية سواء كان المارينز أو السبيشال فورسز قاموا بتدريب القوات المشتركة العراقية العسكر على طريقة العسكرية الكلاسيكية، قتال جيوش مع جيوش. الذي يحدث أن داعش تقاتل في حرب عصابات المدن والشوارع، وداعش لديها خليط من مهارات العسكر، تمتلك خبرات عسكرية وأمنية مرة، بالإضافة أن الكثير منهم لديه قتال وتجربة في سوريا وفي جبهة العراق سابقا، وبالتالي هو يحسن أن يكون أمنيا في المدن وعسكريا في الجبهات. بينما التدريبات الأمريكية كانت عسكرية كلاسيكية إلا جهاز مكافحة الإرهاب. هذا الجهاز هو لا يتجاوز عديده 6000 مقاتل، وهذا تم استنزافه بشكل كبير. وقوات هذا الجهاز أيضا تم تدريبها فقط كقوات صد ومفاجأة العدو، ليست لديها قدرة على مسك الأرض أو تطهيرها. تأتي للتحرير لكنها لا تستطيع المكوث طويلا. هذا الجهاز استنزف من عند أكثر من 30%، فضلا على أن قياداته الكثير منهم استشهد. أيضا الفساد المالي والإداري الذي يغرق به الجيش العراقي. وزارة الدفاع فقط الذين توهمين فيها تجاوز 125 ألف، وبالنسبة لوزارة الداخلية تجاوز هذا العدد الضعفين. إذن المشكلة مركبة من الفساد المالي، سوء التدريب، وعدم وجود عقيدة وطنية.
Thank you very much. I want to thank everybody who took part in this discussion. Also those people who watched it via web stream. We had something like 35 live additionally to us in the room, so thank you very much. I think it is one of many endeavors we have to undergo in order to inform people about the situation in Iraq, Syria, in the region. And it is about human rights, it's about humanity. And this is one of the reasons, the main reason, or the principal reason that we have to stand together with our friends, sisters and brothers in the region. So we must not let them alone. It is really difficult if you live in a region and you have the feeling you are alone. Those people are not alone. And I mean, if you see the events last weekend, you refer to them. First, we don't know the exact figures, but for sure there have been something like 57 women from 10 years onwards being sold in slave markets. It was the same kind of selection procedure again. and many have been executed. The numbers vary from 185 up to 500. Nobody took notice in Europe. And those events are happening all the time, and I think we must not be silent. So we have to take that up, and even if we are only 100 people. And the second point, I think, because it is so important to get more knowledge, and I'm very happy that you provided us with new knowledge, with new insights, is the fact that, as my colleague said it rightly, you in Iraq are defending our freedom, and it's about our life quality. And if you hear from 2 million IDPs in Iraq, another 9 million IDPs coming out of Syria, if you know all these numbers, if you see the situation in refugee camps, I think we have to support those people beside every aspect of humanity who are trying to establish normal conditions in the region again. And normal conditions can only be upon democracy, human rights, institutions, values, and the rule of law. I think this is why these kind of discussions are so important, and why we have to take it up every day. So I want to thank you, our guests, especially all those who took the floor, all those who attended the meeting, and a big thank to the Friedrich Stiftung, who was the co-organizer, who had the idea that we should organize it, and it was a little bit short notice, so it was nearly a week or so we had time to prepare, but it is sometimes like this in this house, we know this, and it's important to take this kind of challenges. So thank you very much. Thank you, my assistants, my secretary. You accepted this invitation, and you made, I think, this event a great success. Thank you.
Thank you.